Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Today's topic is the mystery of sacred mantras. Those of us who are familiar with Vedanta or Vedic tradition or Eastern spirituality should keep in mind some of these important aspects of mantras. In fact, mantras are the most unique contribution of Vedic literature. The word mantra itself, when I give the definition, explains what it stands for. Manana trayate iti mantra. This is the etymological definition of the word mantra. A sacred word symbol that protects you, that preserves you, that guides you, that helps you, that teaches you and inspires you, and leads you all the way to the highest spiritual destiny. That is mantra when you meditate upon its meaning. So, mantra or the sacred word symbol becomes potent and effective when you go deeper, dig deeper through contemplation and meditation on the meaning of the word symbol. Now, when I speak of the word, we should remember one important thing. It is not the visual representation of the word, the printed or the written word. It is the oral representation of the word. That is the essence of mantra. Mantra is not something that you write, that you read about, that you print. Even if you print a mantra in a big font, let us say, it is not as effective, it is not as sacred as when you hear it from a person who has practiced it. Now, to begin with, let us say, I shall not go to any mantras because it's not proper for us to chant a mantra and give an example and illustrate it. It is not proper. But it is very, very, very proper to focus on this universal symbol of mantra called Om that you find here. Now, Om stands for the totality of existence, knowledge, and our understanding and the bliss that follows our understanding. Satchidananda, that is what it's called. So how can a word symbol, however universal it is, represent the totality of existence and bliss? That's because this word symbol, it is not a word actually, it is only a sound. Om is not a word, it is only a sound. It represents the totality of our awareness, or the totality of existence that we become aware of during the three states of our awareness, the waking, dream, and deep sleep stage. This has been used by thousands of saints and sages, both householders and monks, and meditated upon. So this accumulates a strange spiritual potency. So it becomes alive. That's very important. So it gets its life, it gets its what we call Chaitanya consciousness. When great spiritual seekers meditate reciting this with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, So this sense of sanctity and sacredness will help us to go deeper into what it actually stands for. Then it produces in our mind a strange feeling of inner fulfillment, inner joy, and awareness. So you have to, that's why it is not a visual that is implied, it is the oral that is implied. In fact, the entire Vedic literature survives today not because it was written or printed or read or explained, but because these Vedas were taught, listened to, memorized, and meditated upon. Now, this is one very important aspect of Vedas and also the sacred word symbols. Word symbol is the word used when you imply a long word or sentence, but Om is not a word symbol. It is not even a word. It is just a sound. Now, this is not the invention of the human intelligence or human intellect. It is not a discovery of human intellect. It is a discovery within our own hearts of what actually exists everywhere in everyone. So when we meditate, when we chant, when we contemplate, we realize its meaning within ourselves. That's why great spiritual practitioners feel a great joy. Unless you feel joy, you don't do that. If it gives you misery, you don't recite it. That you find everywhere. I can give an example for it. For instance, in India, there were just a few great Christian mystics. Some of them were foreigners, Belgians, Frenchmen, and quite a few during the last nearly 150 years. They came to India and they started wearing these strange clothes that you are seeing in front of you and assumed a Sanskrit name and practiced this unique sound system and started chanting the name of Jesus Christ. And one of them was Abhishektananda, just one, there are quite a few. I'm just mentioning some of those most well-known names. Now, why did they feel that there is something very sacred when they associate this alien, strange, non-Western, non-Hebraic sound symbol, when they associated it with Jesus? Because they felt there was something happening. So that is the universality of mantras. So mantras become potent when you meditate upon it. When you meditate upon it, it actually invokes in our hearts a strange phenomenon which can only be roughly defined as a kind of spiritual common sense or spiritual wisdom that gives us an insight into the reality of things. So that is the uniqueness of mantras. Another important thing about mantras is, mantra is sometimes called impersonal. The Sanskrit word is apaurusheya. Apaurusheya means it doesn't have an author. It doesn't have a writer. It was not written by somebody. It was not discovered by somebody. Because it emanates of itself. It's very difficult to explain it unless people practice it. Well, I can explain it by giving the negative side of the practice. I can give an example. This really happened in India not long back when I was there. Some new neo-reformers started practicing these mantras in a very violent form. So the teachers, this is a new, there are reform movements in India also who break all the barriers. In the name of reform, sometimes they demolish everything. So that's what happened. Very, very often it happens, even with Martin Luther, so I don't have to go further into that. Sometimes you throw away the bathing water, but you throw away the baby also who has taken a bath. That happens. So I can give you an example. Some of these radical reformers who were trying to bring about a change from outside. So when you bring a change from outside, it is called revolution. When you bring a change from within, inside, it is called evolution. And evolution is always a change for the better. It implies growth. Revolution, most of the time, implies a change for the worse. So this happened in this among these groups. They just distributed this home and everyone chant. They didn't give, the students did not properly understand the importance of certain fundamental disciplines that they should undergo before they take up these sort of practices. So they didn't care for it. What happened, some of them were alcoholics, some of the drug addicts, and they started practicing. And the lunatic asylums got a number of new patients. That's the result. People go mad. They lose their inner balance when they play with these sacred word symbols. What does it mean? It is something unique about it. It is a living phenomenon. It is not the dead wire like a Chinese toys. So it is not plastic mangoes. It's the real mango. It is life. It has taste. You can eat it. So these mantras are living, potent, spiritual phenomena that should be practiced only after being established in some fundamental ethical, moral disciplines. What does it show? It shows it has got an inner potential, electricity. You can't touch a live wire unless you want to die. It has got life in it. You can touch a dead wire, but not an electric wire. Like that, these mantras do have this strange potency, because this potency comes from the meditation of great saints and sages who practiced this for thousands of years. Now, this Om is supposed to be the essence of Gayatri, which is the condensed form of Vedas, which actually talk about the universal spiritual reality. Both Eastern Indologists and Western Indologists have agreed on one point. These mantras constitute one of the unique contributions of the old Aryan Vedic tradition. When I talk about Indologists, I have to tell you, there are two approaches to the study of the Vedic literature. One is the method using Western methodology of analysis and study on the basis of philological, linguistic, philosophical, socio-anthropological factors and elements. So you read a lot of these things in the Vedas. The other approach is the traditional Indian approach, where they don't bother much about the socio-anthropological or linguistic aspects of the Vedas. They want to communicate with the Vedas as a great sacred word symbol. So these are two approaches. Both approaches have their merits and also some limitations. But one point is, both the Eastern and Indian traditional Vedic scholars do agree that Vedas were preserved not through visual but through oral tradition. That's why the way you utter it can change the meaning of these mantras. That I shall try to explain this. In Indian philosophy, there is one school of philosophy. It is called Spodavada. Spodavada means the philosophy of the sacred sound. A sound has got a meaning and significance when you hear, when you think of it, when you meditate upon it. To drive home this idea, I can quote from the greatest of Indian poets called Kalidasa, who lived in the 2nd century AD. So his prayer At the beginning of the well-known book, Raghuvamsha or Kumarasambha, I think Kumarasambha is Vagartho Yuva Sambrutto Vagartha Pradipatti Jagada Pidaro Vande Parvati Parameshwaro. So, Vak means word or the sound symbol. Artha means what it implies. They should go together. When they come together, they have a strange potency. But the meaning has got different dimensions in the, it's called Mantra Shastra, the science of mantras, science of sacred symbols. So when you speak a word, you get one meaning, maybe based on the dictionary, the conventional meaning, the acquired meaning, and so on. So you get a meaning, it is obvious. But there is another meaning which it actually implies, and that meaning is not obvious when you hear it. It becomes obvious when you read, when you listen to it and meditate upon it. To give an example, let us think of the Christian psalms or prayers, or Hebraic or maybe Buddhist prayers. There is one kind of prayer. We listen to it, you understand its meaning, its significance, it gives you joy. But as a very devoted person who listens to these prayers or maybe practices these prayers, let's say for years and years, that prayer means something much more profound than what it could mean for a person who is listening to it for the first time. The prayer or the word symbol acquires a deeper meaning. That's why we slowly attach a sense of sanctity and sacredness to that prayer. This find a very good Jesus prayer, maybe some of the statements from the Sermon on the Mount are classic examples from Christian tradition. There are similar examples in the Sufi, in the Buddhist traditions also. So one of the greatest linguists of all times is Patanjali, the author of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. He is credited with having written the most voluminous and the most profound book on philology and linguistics. I want to take this opportunity to give you an idea of the profoundness, the vastness of these ancient traditions. That's why I'm mentioning this. The great scholar who developed a philosophy of sacred sound in Indian tradition was Patanjali. So he wrote a commentary on Sanskrit grammar. Well, you can only compare his book to a huge shelf packed with all the volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica. Think of such a huge collection of books on grammar written in metrical form, verses, not prose. This is called Patanjali Mahabhashya. Bhashya means commentary. Maha means great. The most voluminous descriptive exposition or commentary on Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So he makes a statement, Evam tarki spodas shabdas dhvani shabda guna dhvani spodascha shabdanam dhvanistu khalilekshiti alpo mahamsa keshamjit ubhayam tat subhavatah. That means every sacred word symbol, when you go deeper through meditation, signifies something very profound. This is the essence of mantras. Now I am coming to some of its practical aspects. These sacred mantras have different levels of intensity in our actual practice. From the grossest to the most subtle. So it's called Para, Pashyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari. These are the 4 levels. The highest, then the medium, still lower, and the lowest. When you hear a sound very loud, most of the well-known violent forms of music, very violent, it makes you also violent sometimes. That kind of music, sound very violent, very loud, very disturbing, is an example of the grossest dimension of the word symbol. Now, there are people who practice prayers very loudly. There are many groups in different traditions who practice prayers and sacred repetition, recitation of great prayers very, very loudly. That is fine, because instead of reciting something very loud, something else other than these mantras, it's better to recite prayers very loudly, because they create vibrations. But that is the lowest level of practicing mantras, the lowest. It's called Vaikhari. Vaikhari means something that you hear and others also hear. As this connection, as our connection with the sacred word becomes more and more spiritual and goes deeper and more profound, it becomes madhyama, means you repeat it, but not so loudly. You repeat it so that you can hear, others won't hear. That is a more effective, a higher form of reciting mantras. So as it travels from gross to subtle, from without to within, from very loud to somewhat audible, what happens? It becomes more effective. It produces a kind of inner, inexpressible joy within us. So it is called Madhyama. The third stage is Pashyanti, where you repeat it, you mentally identify its meaning and implication. You feel a great inner joy when you repeat it. And this applies to psalms, prayers also. You repeat it, but it's not audible. Mentally, you repeat it. And you actually connect with what it implies. This is a very high form of practicing mantras, where the essence of the mantras enters your heart. The highest form is when you reach a point, you actually become identified with what that mantra actually implies. So one important sign that a person has reached that level of mantra practice is he becomes one with it. He doesn't repeat it. He becomes one with it. He becomes identified with the essence of what that mantra corresponds. So this is the grossest, little subtle, still more subtle, and the subtlest, the highest. Now, when a person connects with any prayer, any sacred word symbol, or even a sacred sentence, you can find this happening. Well, among all the Christian mystical literature that I had the opportunity to become familiar with, the most profound and the closest illustration that I can give you is from the way of a pilgrim. When the pilgrim learned the art of always remaining in a state of natural prayerfulness, for the Russian Orthodox monk who took the pilgrim, he was a rustic person, who was going in search of somebody who could teach him the prayer that was referred to in St. Paul's first epistle, where St. Paul says one should remain in a state of prayerfulness in a very effortless, natural, spontaneous way. So this rustic wanted to find out somebody who could teach him, and he eventually met a Russian Orthodox monk who took him to his private cell and taught him this prayer. When this happened, when he actually learned and practiced it, when he reached the highest level of what he called para state, then his heart was filled with joy, and he could see the whole creation as children of Christ. That's how R.M. French, who translated from Russian, this way of a pilgrim, that's how he explains in this English version. Now, this more or less applies universally to the whole science of mantras. So as I mentioned earlier, and it's very important to remember, it was transmitted by oral transmission, by recitation, by repetition. The disciple will listen to the teacher and the teacher will repeat, the disciple will continue repeating. So these mantras have got almost 9 forms of repetition. It's only an academic knowledge when you listen to this. This is you just for your intellectual information only. It is called Samhita, Pada, Krama, Jada, Mala, Shikha, Rekha, Dhwaja, Danda. It is only and Ratha and Gana. It's called Gana Pada, Ratha Pada, you know, Samhita Pada, Pada Pada, like that. These are all different technical forms of repetition, which is not directly connected with our subject right now. Now coming to the subject. So this only for the information, that is Samhita Pada, Pada Pada, Krama Pada, Jada Pada, Mala, Shikha, Rekha, Dhwaja, Danda, Ratha. The Sanskrit names for 11 times of repeating this Vedic text. Now this is not related to mantra. It is related to the whole science of oral repetition. As I mentioned, the whole Vedas were preserved through oral repetition. And the science of mantras owes its origin to this unique style of learning and teaching through oral transmission. So they were taught in very, very strange ways, from first, second, A, B, C, D, like that, 1, 2, 3, like that. Then from 1 to 3 into 5 into 7 into 9, like that. So that even if you try, it will be difficult for you to forget. So that's why for the last almost 6,000 years, these oral traditions were preserved. Those of you who want to know a little bit of this can read these very huge, wonderful volumes, which may be available in our bookstore if you can try. It is called Agni, the altar fire. Huge volume, each one as big as Encyclopedia Britannica, written by a great Dutch professor who studied and who taught in Berkeley. His name is Fritz Stahl, who wrote 2 volumes on the science of sacred mantras. That continues to be the most elaborate and the most scientific, as far as somebody who didn't study Vedas right from childhood could do, the most wonderful, the most authentic interpretation of the science of the Vedic bird symbology. It's called altar fire, Agni, A-G-N-I. That's the word, which is Agni. It's a science of rituals where they used to repeat these mantras. Now, one important thing, these mantras were practiced not only in Vedic tradition, in Buddhist tradition also. See, Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dharmam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. It was practiced, repeated by Buddhist monks for centuries. So it took the place of what Vedic mantras, what role Vedic mantras played in Vedantic tradition, these mantras. So Buddham Saranam, Buddha, for them, not only the great Lord Buddha, but also Buddha means the enlightened one. So all the Tathagatas, all the great foreigners, all the great enlightened, great men of Buddhist tradition who lived even before Buddha were invoked, their blessings were invoked by the Buddhist monks, Buddhist and nuns by repeating these mantras. So when Buddha passed away, he did not leave any written record, but 50 years after his passing away, his disciples assembled in Rajagriha in the first Buddhist council, where some of the old senior monks remembered the teachings of Buddhas, was given in Prakrit language. They put it in Pali. So we have got 3 pidagas, that is 3 baskets of Buddhist canonical literature in Pali. So that is Sutta Pidaga, Vinaya Pidaga, Abhidhamma Pidaga. So Abhidhamma and Vinaya Pidaga contains the rules and regulations of Buddhist monks. So they used to practice this. Different prayers of Buddhist tradition can be found in China, Japan, in India, and different countries, and also in the Hinayana traditions of Sri Lanka, Burma, Siam, and such countries. So, the science of mantras, the science of sacred word symbol, was not necessarily an Indian phenomenon or a Hindu phenomenon or just limited Vedantic tradition. Some kind of word symbology can be found in all these universal spiritual traditions. So, this is about its influence. Now, a little more about the mantra itself. In Vedantic tradition, the sound part of mantra is called abhidhana, and what it implies is called abhideya. I gave the example of Kalidasa's prayer. O Lord, let my word and its meaning always be in perfect harmony with each other. Just as the father and mother of creation, Parvati and Parameshwara, are always in perfect harmony with each other. Like that, the word I write in this poetical work, he is not a spiritual man necessarily, but he had a spiritual turn of mind, was the greatest Sanskrit poet in popular literature, Kalidasa. So his prayer was this: let my word, that is called abhidhana, and what it implies, called abhideya in Sanskrit, let them always be in perfect harmony and synthesis. Now, when we repeat these mantras, keeping in mind what that mantra actually implies, then our mind gets connected to the true meaning, the true implication of the sacred mantras. This can be practiced anytime. It can be practiced in a very ritualistic, formal way, but it can also be practiced when we are engaged in different secular activities. All these prayers, whether Christian, Hindu, Vedantic, or Buddhist tradition, all these prayers do have a mantra dimension, and they get this mantra dimension when we look upon these sacred word symbols with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. In Sanskrit, it's called Shraddha. When you look upon something as something sacred, then you attach a higher meaning and significance. When you pray in a church or a temple, when you put a flower somewhere, when you put the flower, you concentrate on the flower, you put your whole mind in the way you hold the flower and the way you put the flower at the altar. Suppose you throw it somewhere in a disinterested manner, in a casual manner, then its effect, God is not going to be pleased or angry, but something happens to our mind. That's the most important thing. All the Vedic rituals are not meant for God or goddesses. It's meant for our own spiritual growth. So when we utter these sacred mantras with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, which together can be called Shraddha, what happens is that mantra becomes potent and becomes an inner current within us, and then it gets a kind of chaitanyam. It actually transforms our consciousness. It takes us away from the empirical. And also, it diverts our senses and mind into creative channels. These are some of the, in the Silicon Valley, you have to bring in some utilitarian, aspects for every kind of spiritual practice. Even the highest philosophy should be connected to some kind of utilitarian. It is sensible also, it's perfectly justified, I would say. But, so I'm coming to the utilitarian aspect of it, the pragmatic benefits of this. Mental repetition of a word symbol or a sound symbol with a sense of sanctity and sacredness will have this refining effect on the mind. It takes our mind to a higher level of consciousness and awareness, and this elevation of consciousness and awareness will express in the form of peace, serenity, calmness, and ability to take problems not very seriously. Because when you are aware of something much higher and profound, then you don't take the problems related to life in this world very seriously. Not that you'll be negligent, not that you will be lethargic or indifferent. You may solve the problems, you may do your best to solve the problems. The problems won't have a crippling effect on our mind. When we connect our mind to something profound and something which is elevating. And this profoundness and this elevation happen in direct proportion to the amount of sanctity and sacredness that we attach to the sacred mantra. So that's a very important thing. I have to address some sessions in which modern linguists try to explain the Vedas as some meaningless ballads sung by the cowherds. In ancient times, cowherds who started riding their horses all the way from Central Asia to India. And so all these nomads were singing these ballads. I countered them with one question. Well, singing these ballads, would you like to travel 8,000 miles and go to India and sit at the feet of a man who was not even properly dressed like Ramana Maharshi and sitting under a cave? Would you do that? To listen to a ballad? I don't think nobody can be so crazy, so insane as to travel 8,000 miles to Ramana Maharshi's ashrama or some other ashrama of the Himalayas and sit under their feet to listen to some nomadic ballads. I don't think even you can be so crazy. It's in a humorous way, in personal interaction, is said. So that is the uniqueness of these mantras. As I mentioned earlier, I want to repeat again, this mantra dimension of the sacred word and sound symbols can be found not only in Hindu or Vedic tradition, but also in other Western traditions also. You find among the Christian mystics, I gave the example of The Way of a Pilgrim. The book from Way of a Pilgrim is one of the most marvelous works in the Russian Orthodox mystical tradition. There are many such books. If you read Saint Teresa of Avila's autobiographical writings, you can find all this. She was repeating prayers all the time, and she could withstand all these problems, you find. So, what it means is, the amount of sanctity and sacredness with which we repeat the mantras, that reveals, that brings out what they actually signify. And that actually manifests in the form of increased serenity and the ability to take problems very lightly without neglecting our effort to solve the problems. Because we are mentally connected to something beyond the empirical. So when we are aware of something higher and more profound, what happens? This repetition purifies the mind. It purifies the samskara. Samskara means our tendencies, impressions. It purifies, it elevates our attitudes, emotions, and feelings. And as a result, what happens is, it produces a kind of natural, spontaneous effect, calmness, quietude. And again, in actual practical terms, the ability to take the world with a smile. That is the natural effect of it. Now, I shall give some examples, let us say, from ancient times. You may have heard that the most important sacred word symbol is Gayatri. So Gayatri is not only the name of a mantra, it is also considered to be the most sacred among the metrical forms of Vedic music. So 24 syllables combination. So that there are a number of Vedic metrical forms like Gayatri, Tushtup, Anushtup, and so on, Brihadi, Pankti. I'm not going to those details, but Gayatri is considered to be the most sacred and symbol. That's because this Gayatri was uttered, recited by the great spiritual seekers of India for thousands of years. Of course, along with repetition of the Om that comes at the beginning and also the end. So that's why Om is considered to be the condensed form of Gayatri, and Gayatri is considered to be the condensed form of the whole Vedas. Now, in the early days, the early Vedic sages used to get up in the morning after taking bath, they used to face the east, the sunrise. And facing the sunrise, they used to repeat a mantra, it's called Gayatri. So Gayatri was elevated to the status of a divine feminine archetype, divine goddess. And what exactly Gayatri means, Gayatri symbolizes, repetition of Gayatri will help you to develop an insight in our mind that helps us to see deeper into everything. As I mentioned, it creates an awareness of some higher consciousness, higher reality. And this awareness expresses itself as a unique type of spiritual common sense. So it produces peace, harmony, serenity, joy, and helps us to look upon life and all our activities with a sense of sanctity. So there is I can give an example, this mantra which I am going to repeat now. It's so ancient. Ayatu Varada Devi Aksharam Brahma Sambhidam Gayatri Chandasa Madedam Brahma Jushaswami. Now Ojosi Sahosi Belamasi Bhrajosi Devanam Dhamanamasi. Now these are I'm not going to repeat the formal way. It's just I'm putting in prose order. May this Gayatri, who bestows all the boons that we seek, who is eternal, who is to be known through the Vedas, and who is the mother of the Vedas, and is the mother of the spiritual insight. Let this Gayatri manifest in me as awareness. So this awareness, as I mentioned, I can only use this word that I frequently use, a spiritual common sense, an ability to look into things with a sense of maturity, and again, to take problems of the world in a way that they do not cripple us. When we feel that there is something much higher than all these that we find in front of us, all these problems are part of the changing phenomenon. It's called the world. There is something much higher, and there's a divine reality, and that divine reality, let that divine wisdom manifest in my heart and guide me and take me to higher and higher levels of awareness. This elevation, this journey in search of higher inner wisdom, it is depicted in 2-3 mantras in the Mundaka Upanishad. In the Mundaka Upanishad, there is a unique imagery of 2 birds. A tree which symbolizes our body, and 2 branches, one below, one above. A bird of the same color, the same wings, same habits, they look alike, totally alike. One bird is sitting on the top branch of the tree. It is sitting quiet, doing nothing, absolutely calm and quiet, totally undisturbed. Another bird is sitting below. It jumps from one branch to another branch. He eats some fruits. Sometimes he eats bitter fruits. He becomes very sad. Sometimes he eats sweet fruit and it becomes very happy. But he looks at the bird above and then it suddenly finds there is not much difference between me and the bird sitting above. So it actually hops from branch to branch upward and eventually reaches the top branch on which the other bird is sitting quiet without eating anything, and then merges into one. This is a bird symbology. Now I can read it. Dua suparna sayuja sakhaya samanam briksham parishasya jade tayor anya pippalam swadati anasnan anyu abhichakasiti. This is the verse. So the bird sitting on the top branch is calm and quiet. It's the symbol of higher wisdom. Rather, it is a symbol of Paramatma, the soul, the higher consciousness, the higher awareness, which is present in all of us. What about the other bird sitting in the lower branch? He goes on eating. He wants to eat fruits, but he doesn't know what fruits to eat. So it happens to eat bitter fruits sometimes, and then sweet fruits, becomes unhappy, and then happy, and again unhappy. Eating the fruits of our own efforts, our own work, our own destiny. What we have done accordingly, we reap and we harvest. It goes on. But we do not know what to choose. We do not know how to divert our mind and our senses into a creative, constructive channel. So often we are at the mercy of our senses. And the senses are the mercy of the sense objects. And our mind is at the mercy of the senses. And we are driven into all these desires, like the bird, without knowing the type of fruits it's eating, suddenly eats sweet fruits, and then it thinks that all fruits are sweet and eats eventually some bitter fruits. Also, it becomes unhappy. Like this human life. So when you practice these sacred mantras, you actually start evolving, like the bird sitting below, on the branch below, slowly starts moving upward. So that's why, samane vrikshe purusho nimaknaha anishaya sochadi muhyamanaha justam yada pasyadi anyamisham asya mahimanamidi vita shokaha. So the bird sitting below suddenly looks at the other bird, which is sitting quiet without eating anything. But he notices that the bird sitting above is perfectly calm and quiet and serene and totally undisturbed. And then it wants to be like that. So it wants to do some spiritual practices. So the hopping from branch to branch, moving upward to reach the top branch corresponds to our spiritual practices. It could be meditation, it could be repetition of the sacred mantras, or just connecting our mind, or feeding our mind with spiritual food. By listening to great ideas, reading great ideas, by meditation, by associating with people from whom you can hear these great ideas. Or you can meet your friends, this should be the subject of discussion. When you meet your colleagues, this should be the subject of discussion. These are different ways of feeding our mind with spiritual food. Like the bird, which is actually moving upward. It takes a lot of effort to reach the top branch. And when it reaches the top branch, then it discovers, well, actually, there is no difference between the bird that is sitting above and myself. And then all the bondages are broken. So some of the great Indian commentators explain these spiritual practices, and they say that they are just like the effort of the bird sitting below, suffering and enjoying, trying to reach the top branch so that it can be one with the other bird, which is actually not different from itself. That's a real nature. But somehow it deluded itself into thinking that it's just the physical body or the mind or intellect. Then it wants to eat fruits, it wants to connect with many undesirable ideas. So once we understand that we have a higher spiritual identity, higher spiritual dimension, and then we try to evolve, make our own efforts to move forward, then we become one with the higher reality. So Vedantic philosophers emphasize that these sacred word symbols, either as prayers or mantras, constitute the most natural way of evolution. Our evolution from, as I mentioned, the symbology from the lower bird to higher bird. So that's the uniqueness of this word symbol. So on the one hand, we should approach it with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Actually, a spiritual seeker, if he has a sense of sanctity and sacredness, if he can bring a sense of sanctity and sacredness to what he speaks, to what he does, the whole life can be spiritualized. But this meant it's not easy, it's a distant goal. But you have to start somewhere. That's why the ancient Vedic sages, they recommended the sacred word symbols and sound symbols as easy ways of practicing. These are the doors that are open right in front of us. That's why Gayatri Mantra actually itself is a very unique one. We meditate on the adorable effulgence of the Lord who creates everything, and who as a divine spark lives in everything, resides in everything, and who is all pervading and is already existing there. So these word symbols help us to discover within ourselves what we already always had. It's not something that comes from outside. It's not something that we produce through our own spiritual efforts. It is something that pre-exists within us. All these efforts, including the repetition of these word symbols, are so many ways of making an effort to discover and connect with and understand our own true identity with it. That is the uniqueness of these word symbols. So I have tried to give a very, very brief, I would say, maybe not for you, too long for you, exposition and attempt to explain some aspects of this word symbol. It's called Mantra Shastra, means the huge, profound science of mantras, which is one of the unique gifts of Indian spiritual tradition. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Vang Me Manasi Pradisthida Mano Me Vachi Pradisthidam Aviravir Maedhi Vedasya Maani Isthaha Sutam Me Ma Prahasihi Anenadhiti Nahuratran Santadhami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavadu Tadvaktaram avatu mam, avadu vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.